This week on A Lively Experiment, is it time for campus police at all public institutions in Rhode Island to be armed? One state rep wants to revisit the discussion. And the Senate president wants to see another expansion of gambling.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by...
Hi, I'm John Hazenwhite Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.
Joining us on the panel, Lisa Ranglin, President and CEO of the Rhode Island Black Business Association, Ken Block, founder of Watchdog RI, and Bill Lynch, former chairman of the Rhode Island Democratic Party. Hello and welcome to Lively. I'm Jim Hummel. We appreciate you spending part of your weekend with us. The mass shooting at Michigan State University this week has many college campuses revisiting their safety protocols, and it is likely to reignite discussion about a proposed bill by Representative William O'Brien to have campus police at both Rhode Island College and CCRI to join their counterparts at URI and carry firearms. A similar proposal didn't get any traction at RIC 5 years ago. Lisa, let me begin with you. This is a evolving discussion, and we have the, Michigan State reignites the discussion. I wonder if we're at the point where this is something we want to do, or I guess a lot of it will be whether the campus is equipped to do it, right?
Right. So let me just say, my heart goes out to the family that have lost their children. Gun violence is a real thing, but also mental health. And as a mom, I cannot imagine sending my child off to school and for them not to come home. So that is just so painful. But let me just say, I think they definitely needs to evaluate whether harming cops, giving cops firearm in school is the right answer. I am very concerned about Black and brown students on campus. That yes, you want to ensure that we have safety and we want to have protocols in place, but what if a police officer sees a Black student and decide that I'm going to take this person out just because they're Black? And that's a real challenge. I mean, there was a study recently that I read that says 46% of students says, yes, we feels better when cops are, with firearm on campus. However, that same study cited that 37% of Black students did not feel safe. So I think and we're talking about CCRI, where the Black and brown students, large population of them. So I'm very concerned. I think we got to protect our children, but I'm not sure if firearm given cops is the way to go.
Yeah, where you stand depends on where you sit on this issue.
Yeah.
Training obviously would be an issue. What do you think in general?
Sure, training is obviously a big part of it. From my perspective on it, I think if you have a protective force to make sure that the student population is safe, it's pretty hard for them to protect the student body when they don't have the armaments necessary to repel somebody who's coming in with a lot of firepower. And I know personally some campus police officers at Rhode Island College, and they personally feel like they cannot do their job appropriately without arms in the case where somebody with arms shows up. So, I understand exactly where you're coming from, and it's a challenge across the board, but I think if the ultimate goal of the police force is to ensure the safety of the students that they're there to protect, it's pretty hard to fight bullets with nothing more than a bulletproof vest.
Yeah, I think Lisa's point is well taken, but I think it's like anything else. It's a balancing act. I think in some places it's been enacted and it seems to be working, but I think that they'll look at it closely here with input from law enforcement as well as our academic people. I mean, there are concerns on both sides, but I mean, a bullet doesn't know skin color, and I think that if you look at in this country, the number of mass shootings, I saw the other day somewhere that there have been more deaths from mass shootings this year than we've had days in the year. And they're young children from all backgrounds, all races. I mean, it's horrific. I'd like to see Ken take some time to go down to D.C. and see if he can get his friends in the Republican Congress to do something about gun control. You know,
He's got Mitch McConnell on speed dial.
There's no discussion amongst the National Republican. I'm not blaming Ken, but there's no discussion amongst the National Republican Party of any consequence to do anything about gun control. Zero. And it's just outrageous. And there's this 24-hour outcry when we have one of these horrible mass shootings, and including from these Republican congressmen and senators, who say how horrible they feel for the family. Yeah. And then 24 hours later, it's just on to other business and nothing happens. And we're the only country in the world that has this proliferation of firearms. And it's just horrible. I mean, within the last 2 days, there were gunshots fired outside a school in Providence. You talk to the Providence, leadership in the police department and the mayor's office, and you've got these ghost guns and unregistered firearms. So this is not a problem in Michigan or just Florida or just California. It's here, it's arrived, it's in Rhode Island. And I would love to see a little more bipartisan activity in terms of trying to do more about it.
The thought has always been that, particularly at RIC, the Providence police are relatively close. But you look at scenes like Michigan State and Virginia Tech. Is it better to have somebody there? Now, a lot of people on campus reflected what you were saying. They were concerned about firearms. That was 5 years ago, and we don't know. It's a crystal ball question. I wonder whether the thoughts on campus have changed, just given what's going on. Kids now who are coming of age and are now 18, 19, 20, they've lived with mass shootings for how long? So I don't know whether the gun gives them comfort or gives them concern. And what you're saying is it depends on who you are, right?
Yeah, I think it's important. I would agree with you, Bill, around common sense gun laws, right? I think we've tried it. I've gone to the State House. Lots of moms have gone up, and we've been advocating, testifying around common sense gun control, and we need it. And I think lawmakers need to step up on both sides. Too many families are being impacted by gun violence. And I just think it's, again, thoughts and prayers not going to bring our children back or our family members back, but we got to fix it. And I think you're absolutely correct around we've been talking way too long, and we do these, oh my God, this happened again. Now we're counting 38, 39. But again, I do believe it's important for us to get our hands around it here in Rhode Island. And if it's law, or let's get it passed. We got to get common sense control.
What about the national discussion? It's been tough.
Come on, Ken. Now, are you going to fix this or not?
he's getting to both ends here.
Look, I've been on the show and I've said quite, plainly, we need gun control because what's happening is outrageous. It's outrageous. I have very little confidence or hope that on a national level we're going to see any kind of consensus about doing something. Which is problematic at the state level, because if you have some states that enact stricter gun laws and other states that don't, we have porous borders between the states, and the end result is just not much will change, I don't think. So it really is, it's a very, very difficult problem. It's one we have to address because the number of mass shootings that we're experiencing is going up. It's dangerous, it's outrageous, it's wrong, it's terrifying, and it's heartbreaking. And we need to do something about it as a society, because Bill's absolutely right. We have a problem with gun violence here that most other civilized countries do not have.
Yeah, well, and it's because of the Second Amendment. You go to Canada, there's no Second Amendment, and there seems to be, and I think that's the discussion you have every year at the State House is, I think a lot of the Second Amendment advocates think if you give an inch, they're going to take my guns away. Yeah. And there's no middle ground. All right. Senate President Dominic Ruggiero apparently has been in discussions with Bally's. He solicited a request for proposal from them, so to speak, for iGaming. Bill, you'd be able to do sports gaming on your phone. Now, apparently, the Senate President says we should be able to do all of this online and not have to leave your house. More revenue for the state. Some people think that might make gambling a little bit more easy, and maybe that's not a good thing. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, full disclosure, I've worked a little bit in the past for IGT. I don't now. But listen, I've said this on this program before when other issues have come up like sports gambling. I'm not a big gambling person, frankly, but gambling's here to stay. It's not going away. It's been around since the beginning of time, and it obviously has evolved now with the onset of cell phones and apps and things that make it easier to do. And I think we just have to deal with that. People are going to gamble. The issue isn't anymore, are we going to have gambling or not? We have gambling, and now we have legalized gambling. And now this is an opportunity. I don't think that it's a relatively new proposal. I don't think it's been fully vetted yet, but I think that the Senate President has made it clear, and I'm sure that the House will take a look at it. It certainly will generate income. There's no question about that. And with that, and just as with in sports gambling, there are downsides to it. There's going to be an attraction to people. I think studies have shown it nationally that the proliferation of more gambling does lead to more issues, mainly with people gambling who can't afford it, can't control themselves, and things of that nature.
And don't have to leave their house to lose their shirt.
It's a challenge, no question about it. But I think, again, it's an issue of do the positives outweigh the negatives, and how do you address it to properly deal with those things. But the truth is, it's not going away, and I think that we have to recognize that. And if we are going to have it, try to put in place processes that make it, as good as it can be under the circumstances.
Okay.
So let me start off by saying that when I worked for G-Tech back in the 90s, I literally helped wheel some of the first video slot machines into Lincoln Greyhound Park because I helped write the software that sits behind all that to tie them all together. All that being said, I think that Rhode Island is relying far too much on sins and sin taxes for our revenue, right? Gambling taxes, marijuana taxes, so what we're not doing effectively is we're not growing our economy, we're not providing the right environment for businesses to come here to bring jobs and to raise up everybody's boat. Instead, what we're doing is we're taxing all these different sin-type activities, which is fine because we're starved for revenue and we have people who want more and more taxes, and they just, we want to spend our money as opposed to doing things to help everyone build some wealth. And I think that we need to be better than that, and we're going to run out of sins to tax at some point, and then what are we left with?
We've got to create new sins.
Yeah. Well, they're right.
Lisa?
Yeah, so I understand where the president is coming from a revenue perspective. I'm concerned about the accessibility and how easy that will be, especially for children. And Bill, you talked about people that can't afford to be gambling. So again, I think we need to ensure that there's proper controls and regulations in place. So this, access to gambling is not going to make people even more in poverty, the poor folks, right? Because they feel like, oh my God, if I gamble, maybe I'm going to win at some point. But you may lose what you don't have. And then how do we deal it with children? I mean, we should be concerned about our kids starting at a very early age. I mean, technology is at their fingertips, right? So I think I understand, and I would agree with you as it relates to businesses not just coming into the state, but businesses here in Rhode Island to grow and scale so they can drive revenue stream as well. And we're not seeing a lot of robust investment in businesses with huge potential, such as Black and Brown businesses that are starving in many cases.
It's interesting how the view on gambling has changed so much, because when you were working for G-Tech back in the mid-90s, they had that proposal for 5 different places, the casinos. They all went down in a flaming mess because people were like, oh, and you also had Republican governors. You had Len Common and Don Kachiri who said, I'm going to wield the veto pen. And so gambling, but now it seems like, it seems kind of ho-hum compared. Now I realize times change, but you remember the anti-gambling fever casino back then, and everybody kind of now seems to be, you want to gamble.
It's certainly become socially more acceptable across the country, and we've relaxed laws about gambling across the country. So to Bill's point, is it inevitable that it's coming? Yeah, it really is. And given that framing, does it make sense for us to embrace it? Possibly. But my bigger point, though, is that we cannot have an effective society, and it's not a great source of revenue to be looking at that kind of funding to keep things going in this state, as opposed to doing the things we need to do to really build a strong economy.
What about that?
It's the first time I've heard Ken admit that he and the Republican Party are responsible for the problems associated with gambling from back when he wielded those machines.
Ken began.
That was way before I became political in any way.
That's true. What about the safeguards, though, Bill? This does go on in other states. I think what Lisa talked about, kids being able to and setting up fake profiles and all of that. That's problematic.
It's a problem but it has to be addressed. I don't want to be repetitive, but it's not going away. And Lisa's exactly right. I have a grandson who's more adept at electronics and phones and apps than I am, but that's the world now. And whether it's educating kids and where the future of jobs are, nobody knows better than Ken that's the area where there's a growing economy going forward. And look, at these businesses like gambling are not immune to that. They recognize that. And it's the same concerns people have had with sports gambling, that you can gamble through your cell phone. And they've put some restrictions. It's relatively new, so I'm not sure how well they're working yet, but we're going to find out. But the bottom line is that people have to be ready to realize that it's here to stay. It's going to evolve. Gambling is no longer going to be only at a casino where you have to go to a location and put a chip on the table or play cards. You can do it on the internet now, some illegal, some legal. And I think this is another step in that direction. So.
How helpful is it to have a 10-year-old when you can't figure out the app on your phone? It's right there, right?
Or how to turn the TV on.
The very basics, Grandpa, right?
Yeah.
All right. The firefighter disability discussion has been going on for years, actually in law enforcement in general. There's a bill back this year that would grant, Ken, I'm going to have you set the table because you've been following this for years. Basically, it would, if you have high blood pressure, hypertension, it would be presumed to be job related. Now, this went on with the police years ago. Now it's back, and there's also some PTSD involved. So set the table for the viewers.
Yeah, so let's start off by saying that the firefighters arguably have the strongest, most effective lobby in the entire state. They really seem to control politics at the local level, at the state level. They're very good at getting things that they want, and they're persistent. They ask for more and more and more. This particular set of bills is troublesome to me for a couple of reasons. First of all, while there are some very fit and very active firefighters, there are also some that very much are not, and they're obese, and they have other issues. So if they have high blood pressure, and they have hypertension, which is the same thing, or they have other issues, is there really medically, is it true that their condition is brought upon by their job as opposed by the general state of their health? Additionally, there are many firefighters who work other jobs besides being a firefighter. And if they're engaged in jobs that are second jobs that are stressful or have other negative health consequences to them, why should the taxpayers bear the burden of whatever the fallout might be from those other jobs? So I think it's dangerous to talk about anything in a generalized way, but now we're trying to generalize the reasons that a firefighter has poor health down the line. And let's face it, a great many people have hypertension as they get older. It's become a fact of life in this country to a large extent. And so is it fair to taxpayers that when some firefighters inevitably get hypertension, that it should be blamed upon the job and give them a very rich retirement package?
And the fiscal ramifications is it's 2/3 tax-free, right?
2/3 tax-free. There's all kinds of things that come along with it. In many different ways, I think it's a bad policy in general. It doesn't really follow the science. But I also am a realist here, and because of how effectively the firefighters seem to get whatever they want, I don't think much pushback is going to do much to stop this request from becoming law.
Say, Lisa?
Yeah, and I mean, you brought up some really great points kind of around when do we stop? Can another, maybe the police officers come back and say, I want the same thing? The teachers, how do we control, to your point around if somebody's not taking care of themselves? Poor health, just, not taking healthy precautions. So I do agree that we should not be paying for somebody to just kind of eat bad and get fat and overweight and then says it's linked to my job. The other point that I probably should make, I think it should be really up to the doctors to really determine if this person should be cited as job related or not, because sometimes it's not. It needs to be proven. But I do agree that the lobbyists will probably most likely push it through. I think the fire departments and the fire unions, they have very strong relationship with legislators. So this is one that they probably will be successful, and then taxpayer have to cover their retirement or their benefits, which I don't really agree with, because then sign me up, right? Many people can say the same thing.
I did a story years ago when they were talking about having fitness tests after you got on the police force. And the whole presumption, you could eat a dozen donuts a day, smoke 10 packs of cigarettes, have 3 wives, and that wouldn't be considered distress related. I think the issue that I have, Bill, with this is once it's granted, you don't go back to look. Like if I retire and I have a pretty decent pension and I can sit on the beach and read a book, maybe my blood pressure would go down. I don't see that provision once the decision is made.
I think the difference, though, with this bill is the hypertension issue, I think, gets maybe too much focus. I think the issue in the bill that I've seen is, in the new issue, is this discussion about post-traumatic stress and whether or not that should be a qualifying problem for a firefighter. And look, I think there already is some provisions where medical people are involved and there can be challenges made and reviews done, but I have to say, and you know, I don't represent any firefighters at the State House, so I don't really have a dog in that fight. But you know, I'm leaving here to go to court this morning. I'm not running into a burning courthouse. I'm not showing up at a scene of a car accident and picking someone's hand up and it's not connected to their body anymore. You know, these are realistic things that we require our firefighters to do in Rhode Island, unfortunately, on a daily basis. And I think you can't ignore that. I think it'll be a lively discussion. And I think that firefighters and, frankly, police officers do deal with issues of significant psychological import that many of us don't. I don't.
But haven't they always? Isn't that part of the profession?
Well, but
is it gotten worse in 2023 than it was in 1983?
I would say, unfortunately, yes, and that's a critique of us as a society. And we started this discussion this morning talking about mass shootings, which have unfortunately become sort of almost an acknowledged regular event now, and I don't think that they were 30 or 40 years ago. And I think we've changed, not always in a positive way, this world and this country and this state. So yes, I think that the responsibilities and the issues that firefighters and police officers deal with have changed dramatically over the past 30, 40, 50 years, and I think we have to recognize that.
You get the final word on that.
Why does he get the final word?
Because we started out with him. Yeah, we don't have a stop clock on it. I'm keeping it going in my head here. Mental timer. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's at some point, enough is enough, and the firefighters come back to the table every session. They're asking for more. They ask for more. They ask for more. I believe that in a small number of circumstances where there is a particular reason for retirement due to disability, that it should be granted and that we can provide it tax-free and everything else. To do it across the board, I think, is silly. It's wrong. Taxpayers should not be on the hook to do it. There will be people who take advantage of a situation like that. And ultimately, look, firefighters aren't naive. They know what they're signing up for when they go ahead and do the job. Will every firefighter retire on disability because of PTSD? Because if that's where we're going, then this is a ridiculous proposal, and there's no way we should do it.
All right, let's go to outrages and or kudos. Lisa, let's begin with you this week.
I think I'm still outraged around the homeless situation. I read an article recently where that really cold spell that we had recently, several people died from being outside. We got to fix this housing crisis that we have here in the state. I'm absolutely outraged that we have a surplus and yet people are dying on benches in our state.
What do you think about Stephen Pryor's appointment as the housing secretary?
So I've worked with Stephen when he was at Commerce Secretary. I do believe he brings a lot to the table. I think he needs to mobilize the larger community. Again, that's not really his background. I think he has some great transferable skills that we'll be able to leverage. However, I think he really needs to be plugged into the community, talk to the folks that have been doing it for a long time. Hopefully, I mean, one person just getting a job is not going to fix it. This is an issue that we've had for decades, right? But I think we have enough smart people in Rhode Island that we can get our hands around. We need more homes, and homes that are actually affordable. I mean, not these $3,000 lofts that no one can really afford, that we're talking about, that are homeless and shut out from access. So we just got to fix this. I'm absolutely outraged that we still have a surplus and we have still people dying on the street. So sad.
Bill, what do you have?
I'm gonna give a kudos to the speaker, who I think's done an unbelievably good job at opening things up and being transparent and working with both sides of the aisle and being inclusive since he's been the speaker. And I'm told from a very reliable source that there's going to be a settlement of the pending lawsuit that the Republican Party filed with respect to JCLS, maybe as soon as today, with essentially that complaint being withdrawn. So I think there was a political issue in play there, and I'm happy to hear that, and I hope that I'm correct.
That was the issue about JCLS meeting
Right.
and voting and all of that.
Right.
All right. You heard it here first. If it doesn't happen, we're going to hold you accountable. I'm going to call you every day to find out what the
You can call Ken, he's got my number.
What do you have, Ken?
So I have an outrage. I'm really outraged by the no-bid $84,000 lobbying contract that was given to former congressional candidate Alan Fung by the Rhode Island Public Transit Association, which is whose executive director or the chairman is Scott Avedisian, who's the former Republican mayor of Warwick. First of all, that our public transportation agency needs a lobbyist seems a little bit crazy, that we're spending taxpayer money to get more taxpayer money. But to do it no bid, to have it what appears to be a sweetheart deal, I believe that I will hold any elected official accountable if they're abusing taxpayers, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. And frankly, for the Republicans as the party in opposition to behave just like Democrats in terms of abusing taxpayers, you really lose one of the few selling points you have to the to the voting public. So I think it's a problem. I think it's outrageous that it happened. I'm glad that the board of RIPTA is talking about unraveling that. And so a partial kudo to that, but shame on everybody else involved for this scheme, which was really ill-advised.
And RIPTA's facing some pretty serious fiscal issues. I mean, I know this is a small part of that, but they're going to have big problems over the next couple of years. So
these Republicans, you just got to watch them every minute.
And that's your job.
You never know what they're going to try to pull. I agree with Ken.
Folks, that is all the time we have. Bill and Ken and Lisa, so nice to have you. We look forward to having you back. And finally this week, we say goodbye to one of the key players behind the scenes here at Lively. Our director, Scott Saracen, is leaving Rhode Island PBS after a 26-year run at the station for a new opportunity. In addition to keeping us in line on this show, he is an award-winning producer who has put together so many great documentaries here over the years. Scott helped guide us through the transition on this new set. He helped design it several years ago, and truth be told, always had my back to hide the occasional blooper here in the studio. He has had the distinction of working with all of my predecessors in the moderator's chair. And he's been around long enough to remember when they used to hold up cue cards indicating how much time we had left in the show. Now, he just whispers a lot in my ear. After a well-deserved vacation with his family, he will begin at the Rhode Island Film and Television Office later this month. Our loss is certainly their gain. Scott, thank you for your steadying presence week in and week out, and we wish you luck with the new gig. And we hope the rest of you can join us back here next week as the Lively experiment continues.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by...
Hi, I'm John Hazen White Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.